That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The moon called. We stopped answering. In a world shaped by invincible systems, power isn't always where you think it is. At Yond Studio, we break down the system shaping the world, not just what's happening, but why it matters. In 1969, humanity did the impossible. We left Earth and walked on another world. And then we stopped. No missions, no bases, no return. For 53 years, the moon just sat there, waiting. So the question isn't how we're going back, it is why now? Why is NASA returning to the moon? Why is China building its own base? And why are billionaires racing to space? This isn't a comeback story. This is a power shift. To understand why we're going back to the moon, you have to understand something uncomfortable. We were never really there for science because of fear. Because in the mid-20th century, the world was divided into two sides. The United States and the Soviet Union, logged into what we called Cold War. But despite the name, there was nothing cold about it. There was a battle for control of the future. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched something small, a metal sphere, barely the size of a beach ball, but it changed the world forever. Sputnik, the first human-made object in space, and suddenly, the rules of power changed. Because if you launch a satellite into orbit, you can launch a nuclear warhead across continents. Space no longer was exploration, it was about delivery systems. And the United States realized they were behind. For the first time in history, the most powerful position in war wasn't on land or sea, but above the planet. From space, you could spy on your enemies, track military movement, potentially strike from anywhere. Whoever controlled space could control Earth. And that's changed everything. The US didn't respond with caution. It responded with ambition. In 1961, JFK made a decision that would reshape history.
But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
But this wasn't an inspiration, it was a strategy. The moon was chosen for one reason, because it was visible to the entire world. The moon wasn't the easiest target, it wasn't the most practical, but it was the most symbolic. Because if you could send humans 380,000 kilometers away, land them safely and bring them back, then you weren't just advanced, you were untouchable. This wasn't just a technological race, it was a psychological one. Every launch, every failure, every success was watched by the entire world. Countries weren't just choosing economic systems, they were choosing sides, capitalism or communism. And the space became the scoreboard. So let's be clear. The moon landing wasn't just about discovery. It was about dominance. A signal to every nation on Earth. This is who leads the future. And in 1969, the signal was sent, loud and clear. But what happened next is even more surprising. By the mid-1960s, the stakes were clear. This wasn't just a race to space. It was a race to prove who controlled the future. And the United States was willing to pay any price to win. The Apollo program wasn't just ambitious, it was massive. At its peak, it consumed over 4% of the US federal budget. Hundreds of thousands of engineers, thousands of computers, An entire nation mobilized. In today's terms, over $150 billion. Not for profit, not for survival, but for one thing: victory. At that time, nothing like this had ever been done before. No one had sent humans this far to space, landed on another world, returned safely. Computers were primitive. Memory was measured in kilobytes, and yet they were attempting the impossible because failure wasn't technical, it was political. And failure came early. In 1967, a cabin fire during a ground test killed 3 astronauts. The program could have ended there, but it didn't. Why? Because by then, Apollo wasn't just a mission, it was a statement. And backing down was never an option. July 1969, the world watches. 3 astronauts, 1 destination, the moon. And then history happens. We hear the very famous phrase,
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Oh, that looks beautiful from here. It has a stark beauty all its own.
and let's be honest, this wasn't just a leap for mankind. This was a message to the Soviet Union, to the world, to history itself. In that moment, the space race was over. The United States was done what the Soviet Union couldn't do, and the world took notice because it wasn't just about space anymore. Superior technology, superior organization, superior execution. The US didn't reach the moon, it dominated the narrative. So why stop? A very big question. Here's where things get strange. After Apollo 11, they didn't stop. They went back again and again. 6 successful moon landings. 12 astronauts walked on the moon. And then they stopped. Not because they couldn't continue, but because there was no reason to. The geopolitical objective had already been achieved. The Soviet Union had fallen behind. Public interest began to fade. And the cost, yes, their cost, was too high to justify. The truth is simple. Apollo didn't end because it lost interest in space. It ended because we had already won. The moon was never the goal. Victory was. For decades, the victory was enough. The moon became history, a symbol of what we once did. But then something changed. The moon stopped being a symbol, and it became valuable again. For over 50 years, the moon meant nothing. No agency, no competition, no reason to go back. It became a relic, a symbol of what humanity once achieved, but no longer needed. Until we looked at it differently. What changed wasn't the moon. It was our understanding of it. Advances in technology, better sensors, new missions revealed something we didn't fully realize in 1969. The moon wasn't empty. It was useful. At the moon's pole, hidden in permanent shadowed craters,
for the future, we'll take the crew and they will land on the moon targeting the South Pole.
Okay.
The South Pole, we have crater rims where the sun, which never gets very high in the sky, that happens when the sun is in the sky when you're near the poles.
Right.
And they're craters that are so deep with rims so high, the sun never reaches the bottom of the thing. So when comets hit and they deposit water molecules on the surface, if it's where the sun hits, it evaporates. If it goes in the middle of the crater,
it's there.
It's a cold trap.
And we got it for water.
It's forever. And so you can, quote, mine those molecules out for water. You can turn it into rocket fuel, separating the hydrogen and oxygen.
I'm starting to see the motivation here. China is going to go. We like, that water's ours, China.
So the South Pole is the object of affection these days.
Yeah.
Not only China has sent rovers there, Russia has sent a rover. One of them crashed, I think. We've sent a spacecraft to the South Pole. So that's where everybody's sort of gathering right now. And if it's going to be a turf war, it's going to be there. And we didn't want to be left out. There it is.
Well, there it is.
Launching a rocket from Earth is expensive. You're fighting gravity, burning fuel just to escape. But the moon has only one set of Earth gravity, which means launching from moon is far easier and cheaper. So instead of Earth Mars, the future could look like Earth, Moon, Mars. Now the moon becomes a staging ground, a checkpoint for deeper space exploration. But the real prize is something most people have never heard of: the helium, a real isotope, almost non-existent on Earth, but abundant on Moon. And it has one potential use: nuclear fusion. That kind of energy that could power entire countries with no carbon emissions, minimal waste, near limitless supply. If fusion becomes viable, helium becomes one of the most valuable resources in human history, and the moon becomes the only place to get it at scale. Then we go from exploration to economics. This is the moment everything changes, because now the moon isn't just a scientific goal, it's an economic one. It's no longer about planting flags, it's about securing assets. This is why NASA launched the Artemis Program. Not just to go back, but to stay. To build permanent bases, orbital stations, sustainable operations, because in this new phase, presence equals power. In the 1960s, getting to the moon was a goal. Today, controlling it might be. And history has shown us something very clearly. When something becomes valuable, competition follows. And this time, the United States isn't alone. Because while America was planning to return, another power was already moving fast. So far, this story sounds familiar. A powerful nation returning to the moon for resources, for dominance. But this time, there's a problem. The United States isn't alone anymore. For decades, space was dominated by one country. Now the balance is shifting. China has been quietly building one of the most advanced space programs in the world, step by step, mission by mission. No shortcuts, no distractions. Each one more ambitious than the last. And unlike the past, this isn't about catching up, it's about overtaking. Then came the announcement that changed everything. China and Russia would work together to build a joint moon base, a long-term presence, independent of the United States. This wasn't cooperation, it was alignment. Because in geopolitics, alliance signal intent. And this one sends a clear message. The next phase of space will not be led by one country alone. It will be contested. And here's where things get more serious. Not all parts of the moon are equal. The most valuable areas are near the poles. Why? Because where the water ice is, which means fuel production, long-term survival, strategic advantage, and there are only limited number of viable locations. This isn't just about exploration anymore. It's about positioning. The US saw this coming and responded with its own strategy through the Artemis Program. It is not just returning to the moon, it's building an alliance, bringing in Europe, Japan, Canada, and other parts, through agreements designed to set the rules early. Because in the new frontier, the first ones there get to shape the system. Let's be honest, this isn't about curiosity anymore. This is about influence, control, and long-term dominance. Because whoever builds first defines the standards. Whoever sets the standards controls the ecosystem. And that's the part no one says out loud. What happens if one side gets there first and locks in the most vulnerable locations? What happens if space becomes divided, just like Earth was once? There's no longer a space race of the 1960s. This is something bigger, more complex, more global. A race not just to arrive, but to stay, to control, and to lead. And while nations are making moves, the people who understand this best are already warning us. By now, the pattern is clear. Nations are investing, alliances are forming, the moon is becoming strategic again. But this isn't just speculation, because the people closest to this future have already started talking. Space researchers have been quietly consistent on one point. The moon is not the destination, it's the beginning. Figures like Neil deGrasse Tyson have emphasized that returning to the moon is less about repeating history and more about building capacity. A test bed, a proving ground for what comes next. Mars, deeper space, long-term human survival beyond Earth. But perhaps the clearest signal is coming from the private sector, because while governments plans, companies execute. Elon Musk has made it clear his goal isn't reaching space, it's making humanity multi-planetary. And while his focus is on Mars, the moon plays a critical role in the pathway. And there's Jeff Bezos, who envisions a future where heavy industries move off Earth and space become an extension of our economy. Manufacturing, energy, logistics, all beyond the planet. Behind these visions are companies already building this infrastructure. SpaceX building reusable rockets, Blue Origin working on lunar landers and inhabitants. These aren't concepts anymore. They are prototypes, contracts, line schedules. And while engineers build, policymakers are doing something just as important: defining the rules. Through agreements tied to Artemis Program, countries are already deciding who operates where, how resources can be used, what ownership means in space. Because history has shown us something, that rules written early tend to last. And here's where things get interesting. This isn't just one vision for the future of space. There are two. On one side, a system led by the United States and its allies, focused on partnership and shared framework, and an alternative model led by China and Russia, building power infrastructures, separate systems, different rules. When experts, billionaires, and governments all move in the same direction, it's rarely by coincidence. It's a signal that something fundamental is changing. The moon is no longer a symbol of human achievement, it's becoming a foundation of human expansion. And here's the uncomfortable truth. We are not just returning to the moon because we can. We are going back because we believe it will matter. But that leads to a bigger question. One that goes beyond rockets, beyond nations, beyond even the moon itself. For most of human history, every conflict, every alliance, every ambition has been confined to one place: Earth. But it's changing. For the first time ever, human competition is expanding beyond our planet. Everything we've built here, our systems, our economy, and our rivals, we are taking them with us to the moon and eventually beyond. And that raises a question we are not fully prepared for. What kind of future are we building out there? Will space become a shared frontier where nations collaborate and push science forward and expand humanity together? Or will it become something else? A new era of competition where power is extended, resources are controlled, and influence is enforced just as much on a larger scale. Because the moon isn't the final goal. It never was. It's the first step and the testing ground. Everything we do there sets the precedent for what comes next: Mars, asteroids, deeper space infrastructure. If you look closely, this moment feels familiar. New territory, competing powers. We've seen that story before on Earth. The only difference is the scale, because decisions being made today by governments, by companies, by alliance will shape the future for decades, maybe centuries. This isn't just a return to the moon. It's a turning point, a moment where humanity decides, do we repeat the past or build something better? We went to the moon once to prove we could. Now we are going back because it might define who we become next. This is Yond Studio, where we don't just tell what's happening, we show you why it matters. If you enjoyed this breakdown, subscribe for more deep dives into technology, power, and systems shaping our world. Because the future is being built faster than most people realize.